Resurfaced at South African Airways. Business rescue practitioners yesterday said that they would need to fast-track retrenchments at the airline as part of efforts to save the embattled national carrier. More than 900 jobs are on the line. The Development Bank of Southern Africa last month gave the cash-strapped airline a lifeline of 3.5 billion rand, and unions are shocked at the impending job cuts. Meanwhile, the Johannesburg High Court has ordered SA Express, which is the second state-owned airline that serves as a feeder to SAA, to be placed under business rescue. And talking to us now about this telephonically is Dr Joachim Vermooten, an aviation economist. Dr Vermooten, thanks so much for speaking to us here on Morning Live.
Good morning, and good morning to the listeners, or viewers, sorry.
Dr Vermooten, in your view, do you think that shedding over 900 jobs at South African Airways is actually a sustainable condition to ensure future funding for the airline?
Yes, unfortunately, the airline overexpanded and it didn't see the same rise in consumer demand, so it didn't enjoy enough revenue. And hence the scale of the operation has to be reduced, and along with that, the scale of expenses also have to reduce, which unfortunately includes staff as well.
So the unions understandably are upset about this, but also seemingly surprised by this latest move of job cuts, because they've come forward. They've also given some suggestions as to how the airline could be possibly turned around. So should they be surprised at this? And could there be a way to avert these job losses?
Well, the first thing is that the unions have proposed legitimate proposals, but I would estimate that the financial effect of that would be maybe 400 to 500 million a year. This airline incurs about 500 million losses every month. So clearly something more substantial had to happen, and that's a scale down of unprofitable flights. And with that, you have to balance the costs and expenditure as well.
So with regard to these impending job losses, is it likely to have any sort of significant impact on the airline and how it operates currently? Because if we're talking about these routes that are already being cancelled, or the cancellations that were announced yesterday, is this, in a sense, preparing us for where SAA is headed in the future?
Yes, definitely. Unfortunately, it has to be rescaled so that the losses become palatable. It has incurred about 6 billion per annum. And with the latest downturn in consumer demand, it's probably closer to the 7 billion level. And that it clearly can't go on. So you have to reduce the scale of the operation to a level where it's affordable for the country. And hopefully that would actually bring things into balance. So unfortunately, the staff levels has to be lower. It was calculated previously that they had to reduce 931, if I remember. And with the latest cuts in operations, that number will obviously increase as well.
So I can't help but wonder whether the cut in operations, is basically a way of justifying those job losses that have been on the cards for some time. We heard about those job losses impending without necessarily the cutting of those routes. So is this, justifying the means at this point?
Well, the first thing is the reduction of the excessive staff levels to the previous operational scale. That related to the 931. And obviously now to adjust the staffing levels to a lower operational scale would unfortunately mean a larger cutback as well.
So the business rescue practitioners, what exactly is the end game here with business rescue? Because I think there is, of course, the perception that somehow this is an effort to turn around the ill fortune of the business and at some point hopefully return it to some form of operational profitability. But if we look at how things are progressing at SAA, what is the end game here with this business rescue process?
Well, I think business rescue is really a last chance. The alternative is certainly liquidation of the company. And I think this is really the last chance that there is to actually make something of it, you know. Unfortunately, in the past, the people that were there when the company was turned around, that was in 2009, all were replaced, and then the scale of the operation increased substantially. The consumer demand didn't rise to that type of level as well, and then it was maintained, hence making large losses. And then certain procurement rules were brought into place, which has obviously resulted into higher costs, and in which the carter unions have made a good contribution as well. But it is really a last chance to avert liquidation. And if it's not done, then liquidation is definitely on the cards.
But what's the point right now if you are cancelling as SAA domestic routes? If you can't even service your domestic clientele, what exactly are we doing?
Well, there are three really different businesses, and they have cancelled flights affecting all three types of businesses, the international, the regional, and domestic operations. A little while ago, Mango's capability was increased from 4 aircraft to 15 aircraft, so that was a substantial move in that direction. And it was just a matter of time when the domestic operations of SAA was just not of a nature that it could be operated profitably. So that is where we are now. And if you look at it, most of the USA major carriers were in so-called business rescue, or the concept of it, bankruptcy protection under Chapter 11, at one stage or another, some of them more than once. And they have emerged from it in much more focused type of airlines, smaller, but with a clear vision, and they have all been very profitable since 2012, and increasingly so every year. So the expectations is that something similar will happen to SAA. The ideal time would have been about 4 to 5 years ago to actually put it in business rescue, but that was opposed by the shareholder and the board and everybody. And unfortunately, a few years of 6 billion were lost.
So if we're being honest right now about SAA and where it finds itself, should we be talking privatization? Because according to the unions right now, they say, excuse me, the airline's business rescue practitioners made these latest decisions without consulting them or presenting a business plan. Does it really matter, or is it now a sense of this is a fait accompli and, excuse me, the business will be privatized?
Well, the government has indicated that they are not willing to privatize the airline at this stage yet, except the part privatization through the introduction of equity partners. I think that's way off at the moment. Any equity investors will actually require a profitable type of airline, so not only a plan to achieve it, but actually some demonstration of that it could be done. If you look at most other countries, there are still many national carriers available that you see around the world, especially in Europe. But all of them have been privatized. Governments found that even profitable airlines always require additional aircraft and systems and in-flight entertainment and so on, which cost more than you can actually fund through a 5% margin on the business. And hence you need direct access to get some more capital from equity markets. So privatization is no longer an ideological thing. It's a pragmatic thing. It happens in communist countries. It happens in socialist countries. It happens in democratic countries. So it's much more a pragmatic thing where governments actually focus their attention on what the business of governments are. And they need funding and to be allocated to those type of resources.
But I guess the problem right now with SAA and the messaging is how ambiguous it is, because as you say, this is no longer, something that we ought to be philosophizing about. It is actually something that pragmatically needs to happen. So why this ambiguous messaging around SAA?
Well, it's very clear in my mind that there's only one option, and that's to actually have a successful business rescue. Otherwise, we face liquidation of the company. And that definitely changed the whole vision of it. SAA used to have a commercial mandate, and it was restructured very well in 2009. But then in 2012, another mandate was passed on to it, the so-called development mandate. And if you have two masters to serve, you can't really serve two masters. You can't have a commercial mandate and a development mandate. And of course, it's much more difficult to actually serve a commercial mandate because things are much more tight than only to achieve certain non-financial targets of a development mandate. And under the understanding of what that development mandate was, many very strange and irrational decisions took place, especially in procurement, which increased the cost for SAA, and hence it became unprofitable. So the objective is clearly to have a final go at seeing whether the company can be turned around.
So yesterday, the Johannesburg High Court placed SA Express under business rescue, Dr. Vermooten. How does this now influence the current crisis at SAA?
Well, South African Express is already in a distressed situation financially. It's been operating under the so-called SAA code, which implies that all contracts of carriage, which are the tickets, are in the name of SAA and not in the name of South African Express. So the money flows then into SAA from passengers and from travel agents, and then they become creditors for SAA, and the business rescue practitioners has a moratorium which is also now applicable to those prepayments. Hence, those were not paid over to South African Express. So it would have been a matter of time when South African Express had to take appropriate actions, and business rescue of SAA would necessarily lead to the business rescue of South African Express.
So given the current state of the airline, why would anyone want to buy it?
Well, you really have to have a profitable objective to actually get someone to buy it, So we'll still see what the business rescue practitioners do in that case. It's different business rescue practitioners, so we hope them all the best.
And also, of course, SAA under the spotlight at the State Capture Commission of Inquiry. What can we expect to hear from that commission? Do you have any insights there, Dr. Vermooten?
Well, the State Capture Commission, or before the Judge Zondo's hearings, a number of individual transactions have been highlighted, and which clearly has cost the airlines much more money than it should have. Those contracts are, in my assessment, still in place. The boards haven't published their financial accounts to actually identify wasteful and fruitless expenditure. And hence, for example, in SAA's case, the unions have made representations to actually stop the wastage of certain of those contracts. The beneficiaries under those contracts obviously don't want to part with it because they're enjoying it. But eventually the company can't pay for it, and the taxpayers is definitely not willing to fund that type of losses. So it definitely highlights certain of the reasons why the airlines got into trouble. It's not the only reasons, but it's a substantial part of it.
So just given the information at our disposal right now, Dr. Vermooten, what's the end game for SAA?
Well, let's give the business practitioners a chance and see whether they can make it. It is a industry where business rescue has been very successful in the USA, in Canada, and even in Europe. And the type of steps that have been taken is in line with the type of processes taken into account in those circumstances. So I think let's give them a go and support them and see whether they can make it.
We leave it there. Thank you so much, Dr. Joachim Vermooten, aviation economist, talking to us about the recent developments at national carrier SAA. We're going to